For many years, I slept with the lights on, even into my early 20s. But not because I was afraid of the dark, if that makes any sense, but because the darkness reminded me of something. The worst experience of my life. Now, in my neighborhood, there were many rites of passage into adulthood. Manhood, all of which involve some degree of physical danger. One of these was the train bridge. The train bridge dated from the 1800s and spanned the river bisecting the town, the rails passing a good 100 feet above the waters below. It was illegal to walk across it, but as the bridge was the quickest way to get across town, people were constantly trespassing. We got pretty good at reading the signal lights and stayed off the bridge when they were green, which meant a train was coming. Each side of the bridge had 2 or 3 small platforms which jutted out from the edge and provided the railway workers with a safe place to stand. On each platform was an empty 45-gallon steel drum open at the top. For trash, I guess. Anyway, they were there. The rite of passage was simple. All you had to do was get inside one of the steel drums and wait for a train to go by. The train roaring along just 3 feet from where you were hiding. I was 13 when I submitted to this test of courage on a warm summer evening. I was a big kid, and the drum was a tight squeeze. I hoped I wouldn't have long to wait. I didn't. I felt it before I heard it, heard the loud blaring of the locomotive's horn as the train appeared over the horizon and began to bear down on the bridge. I took a peep over the edge of the drum and saw this huge red engine coming right at me. I knew it was going to miss me, but from my constrained perspective, it looked like I was about to be run over. I ducked, and the train hurled past at 70 miles per hour, only a yard away from my crouching and cramping body. I had lucked out, and had managed to draw a freight train, which had to have been at least 100 cars long. The vibration caused by the steel wheels made the tiny platform spring up and down like a diving board, the contents of my stomach churning up and down as well. It was like being stuck in a blender. And the noise! It was so loud, I couldn't hear myself screaming. And I was screaming. It probably only took the train 3 or 4 minutes to race past, but it felt like 3 or 4 hours. However, pass it did, and after my hands had stopped shaking, I was able to climb out of the drum, but not before checking to see if I had pissed myself. Assured I was clean and dry, I swaggered back to my buddies and crowed, "That was fun! Think I'll do it again." But I didn't. Nobody ever did it twice. Nobody. That was bad enough. But it wasn't as bad as that other rite of passage. The cave. It wasn't a real cave, more like a glorified hole in the side of the ridge overlooking the creek. But once through the opening, several guys could sit up and talk and look at each other by the light from a flashlight. The urban legend claimed this cave had been used by smugglers during Prohibition. Yeah, right. It was just a cold, smelly hole. So far, bad enough. But it gets worse. And if you are claustrophobic, you might want to stop right here. I won't take offense. For there was a narrow slit leading from the hole in the wall through the ridge 100 yards to the nearby creek. Maybe 3 feet high and 3 feet wide. The test? To crawl through it all the way to the creek in total darkness. I didn't want to go, and I shouldn't have, but I did. Dino went first, then Bry, and then me. I was followed by Gary. I really didn't want to do it, but I was 14 years old and about to enter high school, and I didn't want to look like a coward in front of the other guys. I forced myself into the slit, into the more intense darkness, and began to crawl forward on my belly. It was a tight squeeze for me. At least it was relatively dry, although my body was slick with sweat. I moved forward as best I could, although it was impossible to tell if I was actually moving. Maybe I wasn't moving at all. Maybe I was stuck. Trapped! And that's when I began to panic. I began to think of all the millions of tons of dirt and shale pressing down on me, and I wondered what would happen if we had an earthquake. We could have an earthquake, right? What if the earth moved suddenly, and I was trapped here, unable to move, unable to see, unable to breathe, in the dark, alone in the dark, until my air gave out, and I suffocated. I tried to stand up, but only hit my head on solid rock. I tried to turn around, but couldn't move. And then I realized I couldn't get any air, that I really couldn't breathe, that there was no air in here, no air. And that's when the screaming started. I screamed and screamed and screamed and screamed until I finally forced myself to stop, in case all my screaming made the tunnel collapse. And that's when I heard Gary yelling from behind me, "What are you doing, arsehole? Keep moving." I was crying at this point, crying in front of the other guys, but I no longer cared. "I'm stuck," I blubbered. "I can't move. I can't breathe." And then I was off, screaming again, although Gary kept punching my legs. Eventually, my voice gave out, and in the relative quiet, I could hear Dino shouting, "What's going on?" "He says he's stuck," Gary shouted back. I remained silent, my body frozen in sheer icy terror. I was breathing. I knew I was breathing, but I still felt like I wasn't getting any air. I don't know how long I lay paralyzed. Then something grabbed me out of the inky blackness. I shrieked, only to hear Dino calmly say, "Give me your arms, man, and we'll get you out of here, eh?" I put my arms into the darkness before me and felt them gripped by Dino's strong, rough hands. He began to pull me forward, and after being a dead weight for the first minute, I began to use my legs to help push. My body scraped along the rough floor of the passage and banged against the narrow sides, but I was completely oblivious, as I was totally focused on one thought: escape. The intense darkness began to lighten, And when I saw the light at the end of the slit, at the end of the tunnel, it was no cliche, and I almost climbed over Dino in my frantic attempt to get to it, get to the light. And then I was out. I lay on the rough stones, hyperventilating, and then I threw up. Gary crawled out of the tunnel, looking extremely pissed, but Dino spoke to me sympathetically. "You can't stand to be in tight places, eh?" "I guess not," I answered. I didn't know I was like that. My uncle's like that. He got buried alive in a construction accident and he barely survived. And ever since, he gets upset in tight places, eh?" I tried to smile. "I won't try that again." Dino laughed and slapped me on the shoulder. "You don't have to. You made it." Gary, of course, had to be a smartass. "But if you ever do try it again, I'm going to be in front of you, eh?" I went over and washed the tears from my face in the semi-clean water of the nearby creek. At least, I hadn't pissed or shit myself. The guys were pretty good about it, really, and didn't bug me. But I still felt ashamed. And now I had a new problem. I was afraid of the dark. So afraid, I slept with the light on at night, all night, for most of the next decade. And I was so claustrophobic, I couldn't even stand being under the blankets. Gradually, as the years went by, the fear subsided and eventually went away, although I'm still claustrophobic. But every once in a while, I have a nightmare. I wake up in total Stygian darkness, unable to move, unable to breathe, unable to escape, trapped under tons of dirt and shale, and alone, totally alone. And then I wake up, and I'm lying safe in my warm bed. But one of these nights, I'm going to wake up and find it isn't a dream. And I'm back in the cave! If this is your first visit to my channel, please consider subscribing. My name is Warren, and I write and tell original ghost stories and original horror stories featuring such cryptids as the Night Floaters, werewolves, and the Black-Eyed Children. So again, please consider subscribing. Please help me to reach my goal of 2,021 subs in 2021. Till midnight. Cheers. Pictures used in today's video, courtesy of Pix Here, that's PX Here, while the music was The Dread by that patron of the internet, Kevin MacLeod.